Peace and all good, and greetings once again from the Shrine of St. Anthony here in Ellicott City, Maryland. Once again, we're taking some time today to reflect upon the readings for this coming Sunday. And in particular, over these recent weeks, we've been kind of looking at readings that might not get much attention in a homily. So kind of one of the readings that are probably not going to show up in the reflection that you hear on Sunday. So we thought we would continue with that today. So we will listen to what will be the first reading this coming Sunday from the book of the prophet Amos. Amaziah, priest of Bethel, said to Amos, "Off with you, visionary, flee to the land of Judah. There, earn your bread by prophesying, but never again prophesy in Bethel, for it is the king's sanctuary and a royal temple." Amos answered Amaziah, "I was no prophet, nor have I belonged to a company of prophets. I was a shepherd and a dresser of sycamores. The Lord took me from following the flock and said to me, 'Go, prophesy to my people Israel.'" In just a few short weeks, in about 2 weeks, I believe, the games of the 32nd Olympiad in the modern era will begin in Tokyo, delayed, as we know, from last year because of the pandemic. I'm sure many of you are looking forward to that event, and it's a huge spectacle and a great celebration for the peoples of the world. But if you're of a certain age, you might remember a time when the athletes who participated in the events of the Olympics were exclusively and had to have been amateurs, people who were not professional, people who did their sport, practiced their sport for the pure joy of the sport, basically, to celebrate that sport and to show how good they could be in that sport, for the pure sake of sport, and not to make money, not for professional reasons. Sadly, that changed. That's a commentary, but sadly that changed over time. And now many of the sports, the Olympics, are populated by professionals, and it's become a rather huge money-making operation, hopefully, for the athletes and the sponsors of the events. So it's kind of lost something. Amateurs versus professionals. That's very much the theme of this first reading today, believe it or not, with Amos. It begins with a professional prophet, Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, talking to Amos and telling him, "Go ply your trade someplace else. Go earn your bread by prophesying someplace else." Amaziah, not one of the true prophets of Israel, but kind of a professional prophet, right, was plying his trade, and Amos was kind of homing in on his territory, and he was trying to chase him away. Amos, as he clearly says, was not a professional prophet. Right. He says, "I was no prophet, nor have I belonged to a company of prophets, I was a shepherd and a dresser of sycamores. The Lord took me from following the flock and said to me, 'You go, prophesy to my people Israel.'" Amos was chosen by God to be a prophet, right? Not by a priestly class, not by the temple authorities. He was called by God to be a prophet. And he was truly an amateur. He did it because that's what God called him to do. He did not do it for money. In fact, he supported himself by being a shepherd and raising figs. But the Lord calls him and uses him as a prophet, as not so much someone to predict the future, as so much to speak the truth to the world in which he lived, to preach righteousness, to preach how the relationship between worship and living in the real world should be lived out, and the importance of living a righteous life in this world, and the causes of justice for the people of his time. He was truly an amateur. He did it out of love for God, not out of a professional interest. We live in a world today where there are many professional prophets in all areas, whether it be political or social or economics, or even within the church, perhaps you could say. Right? People who do what they do, say what they say, with an agenda, with an interest, right? The professionals. But oftentimes, and we've all been there, I hope, right? It was the amateur, as it were, who spoke God's word of truth to us. You probably heard the familiar saying, from the mouths of babes, children are guileless, they are honest, they're true, they haven't learned how to lie yet, as it were, right? And oftentimes, God will use the simple words of a child to speak truth to the world, right? The ultimate expression of being an amateur prophet, right? I think there's good news here for us. All of us, all of you, are called to be amateur prophets. Again, not for the purpose of building yourself up, not for the purpose of promoting an agenda, right, that has self-interest, but rather speaking the truth to the world in which you live in, right? Whatever that might be for you, wherever you are in life. Right? The Lord wants us to be amateur prophets. The Lord wants us to speak His truth, the truth of God, the truth of God's values, the truth of God's morals, the truth of God's faith into the world in which we live. And again, not out of self-interest, not with an agenda, right? But for the simple love of God. Because that's the ultimate meaning of the word. That's the literal meaning of the word amateur. Someone who does something purely out of love. May God continue to bless us, to help us to be true amateurs in the eyes of God. May God bless you, and may God give you peace.